Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Kanda, a licensed clinical psychologist and founder of Healthy Life. I am here with Greg Obert. Greg, you want to tell us a little something about yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Greg Obert. I'm one of the therapists at Healthy Life. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor here in Illinois, and I love my work.
And you're very good at it too. Very good at it
Thank
too.
you.
So the reason why I know you and I wanted to have this chat today is to start just telling people about a therapy that's out there that is very helpful in decreasing the symptoms associated with post-traumatic stress disorder. Um, it has a really interesting background to it, how it was developed, why it was developed. But this therapy is called narrative exposure therapy. I know, Greg, this year you just started using this therapy over the past year, right?
Yeah, this was a new type of treatment that I had never heard of, or at least used in practice. Heard it maybe in passing. But as I looked into it, as I got training in it, I started using it. And I have to say, it is such a fantastic treatment for people who are going through any sort of trauma or past trauma that they want to start processing. It's not typically what you'd see in a lot of treatment settings either. It has components of narrative therapy and exposure therapy, and it kind of blends the two in this just really beautiful treatment that I think helps people heal in such a phenomenal way. But you're the one who has been using it longer. I'm curious if you could maybe give us a bit of an overview about what it is and kind of how you got into it.
Absolutely. So it's really interesting because this was created really to help people. Well, let me back up. It simplifies a lot of these therapeutic approaches and just cuts right to the chase of what works for PTSD treatment. And a lot of the times, like what we do, it takes a lot of like calculation and training and things of that aspect, which is great and necessary. But sometimes we need to break down and just look at what we do in therapy as a conversation, as telling our stories of what has happened in our life. And a lot of times people with trauma histories have these stories, these narrations of their life that need tending to. So it's created actually initially out of Africa to help refugees, and narrative exposure therapy is, I was introduced to it because I was asked to be a part of an interdisciplinary team that was going to go to Uganda, Africa, and this organization, HOCW, Hope of Women and Children Victims of Violence, you can look them up online, they're amazing. This organization, they could have asked us to help with almost anything, and they asked us to help with mental health. So we took an evidence-based approach that we're all trained in, meaning what works for this specific population. And we dove into the literature, using the request of the individuals over there, more mental health care. And what we found, there's a high rate of post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's a specific therapy out there that works exceptionally well. In fact, it works when we train people, peer counselors, how to do this one type of therapy for one type of diagnosis. And we went there, and we, they actually found people that were reputable, trustworthy, and we created this program where we trained individuals to do narrative exposure therapy for the individuals of their community. And I mean, going into this, it's just we're using our tools. We're using that evidence-based approach, right? Our research minds, right? There were, medical students. There was myself. I was a grad student at the time. We did have a psychologist as well with us, and lovely. It was a phenomenal experience, but it's like, how can we? Gosh, it really felt like, instead of giving man a fish, it felt like teaching a man how to fish. And we took this therapy, and then we researched it. My dissertation became this project. And what we saw is that this therapy really helped people. And it just, by having people tell their life story and hone in to the areas that caused them pain, and just allowing them to talk about it and how it impacted, what they learned from that, using what we as therapists say as Socratic dialogue to help them really look at how that impacted their life. Their PTSD symptoms went down. And it was wonderful to see that. We don't just, say it's been helpful. We had evidence that this approach is helpful. And, looking at the literature further, narrative exposure therapy doesn't just have to help people, who are refugees, people who, this is a therapy that is an evidence-based treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. And, I've had it where, maybe all these other treatments don't work. They don't connect with the person. They don't connect with the patient for PTSD. But this one, I don't know what it is about it, but this one really, it makes it a conversation. It makes your life story a conversation. And I think some people just need to literally have a conversation about the trauma without like an intensive manualized approach for it. So I know that's like a bit like long-winded from the question you're asking, like what my experience is, like what brought me to that. So like literally like traveling to the other side of the world twice and then studying it, researching it. This has a place. Narrative exposure therapy, it should be practiced in many areas. It's ridiculously helpful. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. For the listeners out there, it may sound a little different. My other microphone just took a dive. But as I'm listening to you, the thing that's just standing out to me is just what a wonderful gift you can give to somebody to be able to help them move beyond just one of the lowest parts of their lives. And I sort of liken trauma to a room full of filing cabinets. We all have filing cabinets that are neatly, everything's kind of together except for certain drawers. They're open, things are just kind of scattered and thrown all over the place. And it's hard to look at those drawers. And, by engaging in this type of therapy, we're able to slow down, we're able to look at the papers on the floor, hold all of the emotions and the mess in our hands, and then we're able to neatly try to file these away. And I've just seen incredible results with people that I've worked with this therapy. It's sort of counterintuitive in a sense to think that, well, if I focus on the trauma, I'm going to start to feel better. You'd think kind of avoiding it is the way to go, but actually it's the opposite. Yeah. And by framing it by framing your trauma into your life story, you're able to kind of get that coherent narrative and just put the trauma back where it needs to be and change your relationship with it so it's not dominating you.
All of your life, right?
Mm-hmm. So I wonder, go ahead.
No, please. Sorry.
I was wondering, we're kind of talking about this treatment, generally speaking. I wonder if we could maybe outline what sessions would look like with people, maybe not necessarily all the details, but just so people know if I'm going to come in for this type of treatment, what can I expect?
Yeah, it's absolutely, absolutely. It's one of those things where this treatment, people can really start to experience relief pretty early on in treatment. I know that sessions are actually intended to be much longer than the standard like 45 or 55-minute session. So, I know, Greg, that there could be like a hyphenated approach where you can make, maybe twice a week or 1 hour sessions, whatever it is. But basically in the intake appointment, you go through your diagnosis and you make sure that the individual has post-traumatic stress disorder and the fact that they would be appropriate for this treatment. And then in your first session, you go through and you create, it's actually interesting. You go through and you can start to create a lifeline. And this lifeline is a visual indicator of that person's life. And so it's like something you can actually, like if you're in person, I know everything is virtual, so we go, PowerPoint presentation, making this versus actual items, right? But it's something you can tangibly see. So it has a rope to represent your actual lifeline. There are flowers by this rope that represent happy memories, rocks, which represent traumas, sad times. And you work together hand in hand with this individual to create a visual representation of their life story. Now, every person at the beginning of their lifeline has flowers. Now, some will try to argue that. Some will say, no, my life was cursed from day one. Terrible things do happen at birth. My mother passed away when I was born, but your life is still a blessing, right? So always having the flowers at the beginning. And then we also put them at the end for hope, right? Make these 3 wishes at the end. And once we have this lifeline created, you're able to, in chronological order, go through your stories. And then, of course, we pay close attention to those rocks. It's a system to help habituate you, to expose you, to allow yourself to confront these rocks in your life. And when this is happening, your story is essentially being documented as well, which is so cool. It's so cool because at the end you could have like a written version of your life for you. That's yours. That's your story.
Yeah, I mean, how often do we have our lives, just kind of put in front of us and said, hey, this is where you come from. This is all of your successes. These are all your struggles, and to be able to put them, like you say, 3 wishes at the end. Where do I want my life to be? That visual, just having that visual before even kind of really trying to hold the trauma and look at it, that visual is such a powerful experience for people, because it's not something any of us really do in our daily lives.
No, it's not. It isn't. And I really, that's I think the reason why it makes it a little bit more approachable, right? Like instead of like learning some more abstract approach, which is also very helpful, right?
Sure.
Some people just seem to work better with this style of therapy. And, you mentioned going back around, right? And you talked about at some point you start to go through the flowers, the rocks or boulders for some people, right?
Sure.
Go through the boulder. And people will say things like, God, I totally forgot about that aspect, or it actually happened in this way. That's really interesting because it really helps with the healing process. And when a person is done going through the flowers, the rocks, the boulders of their life, to realize at some point that in life, no matter what we do, all of our lives, every single one of our lives is covered in flowers and rocks. And yes, some people have bigger rocks than others, of course. But it's so much out of our control. And life can still be beautiful, worth living for, fighting for, despite all those components that have happened to us. And that's where I love the 3 wishes. But yeah, it's a very satisfying, it's emotionally tough ever, to look at trauma in our past. But it's a very helpful therapy that I don't think enough people really know about, ultimately. That's why we're talking about this, right?
Absolutely. I mean, even in a lot of my past training, the typical sort of trauma treatments that you'd see would be something called prolonged exposure, maybe EMDR, or there's these different types of trauma treatments pushed. But something like this is just unique in that it has a lot of those benefits of those other treatments, but you also have that visual, you have that lifeline that you can hold on to and see. And while it is, of course, a clinical treatment, I think it feels less clinical for clients because it's more story-based.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you've heard, how many times have you heard someone say, like, it's really nice to just feel like I'm having a conversation with somebody. Like, I think sometimes we get too, as therapists, stuck in like this theoretical world, and we don't realize that people are here to talk to us. They're here to have like a real conversation with us.
Yeah.
And by real, sometimes not talking about things you want to talk about, but real. So I don't know. What else should we cover about this? What do you think? Did you want to say? I know. Sorry. Go ahead.
I wonder, obviously we don't have to go into specifics of different people, but I wonder if you have a sense of how people tend to feel when they get to the end of this treatment compared to who they were and what they were experiencing when they came in.
Such a good question, Greg. I think there's relief. I see a lot of relief. And like people being proud of themselves because they survived those things, right? And still, even despite those rocks, like to see flowers after that, to see positive things can still happen in our life, even after those boulders, like that sense of like relief and like maybe feeling a little bit more confident. And now because they confronted it, it doesn't come up as much during the day for them. They can get back to their life, have a good time.
Yeah. Relief, that seems to be the word that comes to my mind too. If we go back to my analogy with the papers, instead of altering your path through the room and trying to walk around everything, you're in control. You put those papers away and you can go back to your life.
Yeah.
I think too, maybe it might be helpful to talk about what NET isn't. Sometimes people may come in and they say, well, if I go through this treatment, the trauma goes away, right? And then I don't have to deal with it anymore.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note that what we're trying to do is work on your relationship towards that trauma. I really wish I had a DeLorean and I could go back in time to fix the trauma, right? But we can't really do that. No. So it's more about managing how we relate to that and really trying to put it back in its place in the past, so it's not constantly coming up in the present.
Yeah, I love the way you phrase that. Changing your relationship with the past, that encapsulates all of it. It really does, because it can feel like a tumor that you just can't get rid of. That's what trauma is. It's something that no matter what is, you can't remove a memory or memories. You can't. And, you know, yes, there are diseases that lead to memory loss, but we all have painful memories, and some of us have trauma memories. And there's nothing we can do about it except for your words, change our relationship with it.
Yeah.
Learning how to deal with pain.
Yeah, and it's by changing that relationship, you know, we're able to just cope so much better. I mean, I've seen people who tell me they can laugh again. You know, they feel like they can connect with people again.
Yeah.
They don't feel so isolated or angry. And just to see all of that happen through this creation of the lifeline and this ability to hold the trauma and then sort it and put it into the past, it's incredible to think that a fairly straightforward treatment can provide such profound changes in people.
Yeah. God, if only everything could be this easy, like this, like this user friendly, right?
Yes.
I absolutely love this. And, you know, it's one of those things. I know we talked about how with your training on it as well, like you're available to help people with this. You're available to start pointing people in the direction of relief, of that better relationship with their past, right?
Yeah, I think that's important to note too for those listening that, you know, might be interested in something like this. You know, the practice that I work for, Dr. Canda's practice, is called Healthy Life. The website is healthylifechicago.com.
Right.
And you can learn more about both of us. And, you know, I do have openings for this type of treatment if you feel that it's appropriate for you. And we even offer telehealth. So you don't even need to go anywhere. You could, you know, do the stereotypical put on a nice shirt and no pants and go to therapy.
Exactly. Just nice and relaxed, feel comfortable in your own home. That's
right. So, you know, it's something that I would encourage any listener, if this is something that you feel is appropriate and, you know, you are intrigued by the positive changes that can happen with you. You know, again, healthylifechicago.com. That's how you get in contact with us. We're also on Instagram, we have, and Facebook.
Yeah.
And Twitter. Is Twitter? You have Twitter?
No.
Not Twitter. Facebook and Instagram.
One day in the future. Yeah, all of the above. But it's, yeah, we just want to make you healthier.
Absolutely. That's our goal. Well, I don't know if I have anything else that I think would be good to cover, but
sure. I think we covered it. I think
perfect. Well, you know, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat about this, and thank you to all our listeners who are at the end of the video now. We're still listening.
But yeah, contact us if you need anything. Thanks so much, Greg, for chatting, and I'm sure we'll be chatting soon. Okay.
Right, thanks so much. Bye.